Okay, now we're going to do questions. So what I'm going to ask is, you put up your hand, I'll come over with the microphone. I was going to see if we want to take down names, because we're going to be recording the minutes of the question and answer, so we can share that with people after the meeting. Is there sort of a general, is everyone happy to sort of just say their name and then ask the question? Yeah?
We live in King Street. Yep. Has thought been put to the idea that the properties in King Street are further back, and would, considering the people lower down objected, I don't know on what grounds, but people up further north in King Street might not object, because their houses are not so close to the house. And another question, what about wind power? What if you put a small wind generator on your house? Is that the same input in the same
Small
way?
wind's terrible. I'm just going to say I work at a wind farm as well. It's not very good for generation because it's too low down and you get the greatest wind resource higher up into the air. But it's a cool idea. They look really fun, but apparently they're not very effective. But I'll pass on to, I think we have been talking about, many different sites that could be potentially possible. And opening it up to that wider network.
We are looking at north of King Street. We selected those sites south because that was where most of the solar was. We are investigating to find out whether there's enough solar north of Cook Street on King Street. There has been a suggestion from one of the CRG members that near the church might be supportive of the battery out front. So that's something we're taking away. When we approach United Energy, we can't just approach them and say, find us a place in Flinders to put this battery. They like us to go to their network technicians with a specific address. So we like to make sure those two locations earlier were done really for the timeline and for the application. We're now widening this through the community reference group and through all of your feedback to look at all the opportunities. So if there is anyone here in King Street that wants a battery in front of their house, definitely. Or if you know anyone, this is the opportunity to talk to the community widely about where this battery could go. And yes, it's if we can refine some locations to send to United Energy, some further ones we will.
Just going to say, Sue Guthrie, South East Water have just put in half the size of a battery in King Street with no consultation with anybody. It was just put in the last year. So, yeah. So, why don't we just go ahead, do it, plan, do it, just do it. Well, South East Water can do it, why can't we?
We'll take that as a comment. We'll jump over this.
I have two issues. I have a house in Flinders, but it's a holiday house, and I want to make sure that people like me are represented on the community reference group, point number one. Secondly, my house is in King Street at the end, the cliff end, where the road is full of potholes, and we have tried, I don't know how often, to get the council to repair it. And if you're going to put in a community battery there where the traffic coming through the golf course on the way back is pretty horrific, and you want to ultimately have charging stations, that is not going to work.
Yeah. So I think one of the things to identify with the first point is that the community reference group is composed of a diverse mix of residents. So we do have somebody who, I believe their property is predominantly like a weekender type thing. So we are really, and also I guess one of the things is there are very many different kinds of views of the community reference group members. And I think that's a really important part of that process, is to take on those perspectives. Yeah.
You never stand up as a council representative and never not hear about the potholes. I know all that. And look, we're just trying to concentrate on energy, and I'll defer that to to
No,
the
but I'm
roads.
thinking further down the track, if you want it as a charging station, it's the,
Yes.
there's another factor that has to be taken into account.
Yes, yeah, and I think the other issue we need to consider too, even though Lachlan went through the specifics on the battery, that it is, you know, fairly dust-proof and protected from water ingress, but a lot of the roads also in Flinders are unsealed. So there is, you know, that is something else we have to investigate, and probably has never happened anywhere else in the world that a community battery has been situated on a dirt road. So we would need to investigate that and ask United Energy to further too. So yeah, there's a lot to think about in terms of road and environment around this battery. And I think we can also say fire risk has been, you know, top of mind for a lot of people in their responses, and that's why we went into great detail on how different these are from golf buggies and scooters, e-scooters and electric bikes. So they're a lot more sophisticated technology and supported by cooling systems and a whole lot of other little mechanisms.
Thanks, Jen. I'll just go over here and then I'll jump over to you over there.
David Linder. Do we have an idea of what level of curtailment there is existing at the moment? Like, I mean, how much energy are people producing that just can't appear on the grid, you know, because it's just overloaded? Are we in that predicament at this point?
Yeah, it's a great question. That data isn't shared by United Energy, so unfortunately we don't know. In our assessments, we use heuristics, essentially. One of the heuristics we use is the total capacity of generation relative to the transformer size and the number of customers, because the level of curtailment depends on a large number of variables. There's the thermal characteristics of the conductors, the voltage levels that are set at the distribution substation, and because curtailment is a voltage issue, and the demand profile of that low voltage network.
So it's just not visible.
It's not visible, but if one of DECA recently released a voltage management consultation paper, and I think they've done the final report, and they show at an aggregate level across the 5 Victorian DNSPs, they show voltage levels across the day. It's not particularly helpful because it's an average, and the average is irrelevant in terms of curtailment at a local level. But you can see that in regional areas in particular, where there's a lot of solar, the voltage is sometimes averaging over 250 in the day at the customer connection point. The nominal voltage is 230.
Yeah.
The DNSPs typically set the voltages around 240 or 245, sometimes higher, to account for drop in voltage along the conductors and when there's peak demand. That means that during the day, the voltage is coming in at 245 and then additional solar is adding to it. And the upper limit of the regulated, the compliant level is 253. So it's not a stretch to think that in areas like King Street, where you do have a lot of solar, you do have minimum low daytime demand, particularly because there's holiday houses, that there would be issues with voltage rise and therefore curtailment. So that's our heuristic assessment, but we don't know. Yeah.
So is that the trigger point for the charging of the battery? Like the voltage gets to a certain level and then it begins to charge? Like,
that'd be a good idea, actually. That's not what we do. The operation of the battery, I mean, we haven't installed it yet, so there could be a slight shift in the dispatch principles. But the way we operate the North Fitzroy battery is we charge between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. At half power. We sort of take a dollar cost averaging approach. It's a scheduled dispatch. That's when prices are lowest. That's when the network tariffs reward us for charging, and that's when there's the most solar generation. And we lower the voltage at the connection point by 3 volts the whole time that the battery is charging. So the charging isn't triggered by the voltage, but it does address voltage for that 5-hour period.
Thanks, Lachlan. So I did see a hand up over here. Just come round.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, can I just say that I'd like to put a caveat on people who are thinking, or the neighbours might be thinking, of putting in solar. I've been putting solar on my place, so there's no more room for any solar on the roof. But there are a number of very much fly-by-night organisations that will get you to sign a contract and then not do anything until after the 10-day cooling off period, whereupon you end up in VCAT trying to sort out what's actually happening, because they tell you that you might need to change your entire system to 3-phase or some other complexity. The other thing is about communication. We've talked about communication. The Flinders Community Association website and Facebook have got all of the information that one should need to discuss all of this. And if you haven't got a computer, it's also put on the Flinders General Store window. Now, the other thing, which is, I suppose, somewhat irrelevant, but I was looking at the questions and answers for Flinders Zero Carbon. Now, I'm talking about communication. It says, the battery may also reduce the likelihood of solar constraints on the low voltage network on which it is connected. Battery may also defer the needs of future augmentation of the network, costs of which are passed on to customers via network tariffs. Now, I don't know what that means, but that's the answer to one of the questions that appears on that website. All I'm suggesting is maybe we need to put that in 4-letter words that people will understand.
I think that that's a very fair comment, and it's often, difficult for us energy nerds to kind of step out of the little bubble that we inhabit and realise that words like augmentation might be a little bit confusing and complicated. But I can explain what that means to some extent. I don't know if Lachlan, if you want to have a...
Yeah. Jeffrey? Oh, do you want to speak to it, Jeffrey?
Yeah, so that question goes to one of the slides earlier that was about what makes up your power bill, and about 40% roughly is network tariffs, which are charged to you by the distributor, in this case United Energy, and those tariffs are then recouping costs that they've invested in the poles and wires themselves. So any additional investment they make to the network, they're enabled by the government agencies to seek that money back in the form of revenue, and they do that by applying network tariffs to customers. So one of the hopes is that wherever the battery is installed, just say it's a 120 kilowatt system, that doesn't have to mean much to you, but the battery is essentially increasing the rating of the infrastructure by 120 kilowatts, which should extend the time period before that infrastructure requires upgrading. So that's what deferring network augmentation investment means. And the hope is that at scale, that can reduce network tariffs and therefore achieve better affordability of power prices.
Thanks, Lachlan. I can see that Jeffrey wants to...
Thanks, Mary. Jeff Nicholson. Just interested, Lachlan, how the battery actually makes money for or is good for Flinders. So, as I understand it, the solar's fed into the grid at 5 cents. Your downloading energy, I assume, at the lowest time of use tariff into the battery. I don't know what that is, it might be 20 cents or something like that. And then you feed it back into the system at peak time. So you get 32 cents for it there, or whatever. And so you get a bit of arbitrage. So there is potentially that advantage. Alternately, you do a deal with United Energy where they can manage the battery, and as you're saying, they manage it in a way that lowers the load in Flinders, and therefore the community gets a benefit. What I'm struggling with is how it actually is beneficial to Flinders rather than to the grid as a whole. So that's the first question. Second one should be pretty simple. Why does the geographic location of the battery matter so much? If the solar panel pushes it into the grid, then it doesn't matter where the battery is, does it? Because you're going to feed it, from the grid.
Thanks, Jeff. I feel like I should also do a little conflict of interest that Jeff is a director was a director for United Energy. Yeah, there we go.
Quite energy right there.
Yeah.
So I'll start with your second question first. Some of the issues we've talked about are voltage rise on the low voltage conductors, and when solar panels export energy and induce the rise in voltage, that applies in particular to the conductor that they're connected to, secondarily to the rest of that low voltage network, and I would think, you might know better than me, Jeff, but to a reduced degree beyond the transformer, because that's a fairly significant piece of infrastructure in terms of the connection of the network. So curtailment of solar systems is most likely on conductors and low voltage networks where there is very high solar penetration. So this is the ecosystem in which the battery has the greatest effect. There are, let's see, how far back can I go? I'm pointing it at the screen like the screen knows what I'm doing. This slide shows, I think, 3 ways of thinking about how the battery supports the clean energy transition. The top one is the system-wide effects. That's functions that spinning machines provide the power system that have to be replaced. The middle one is typically local problems that apply in that ecosystem that I was mentioning. So if you have, we've already talked about voltage rise, another one is peak demand. The peak demand is felt at that distribution transformer. So with the increase in electrification, more and more energy consumption is happening. That is a biggest problem when everyone's use coincides, and that's when it's most likely to exceed the ratings of the network infrastructure. So in a sense, that's a network problem, and the benefit of the battery is a network benefit. But in the increasingly decentralized energy system that we're a part of, that has larger and larger implications for households, not just in terms of solar curtailment, but also the capacity to install your own EV chargers and potentially a public EV charger. The battery is a way of transitioning not just the energy supply, but the network as well to meet the demands of the future, which, as Murray showed in this slide, it's getting a little bit more complex. And this is the duck curve that we've referenced a couple of times. Again, it's an average, but we're going to see a far steeper ramp from the middle of the day to that peak demand period. Just thought that was worth noting. The first question you asked was around revenue generation. You're right in that the battery will conduct arbitrage on the wholesale market. That's not the full extent of its revenue generation.
This is the hottest hits, guys, in case you have any of these questions coming up.
Right. So this is from some of Yef's modelling. It's all just proportional because it depends which system size. But in 2024, we would estimate that 60% of revenue would be associated with wholesale energy arbitrage. Now, the wholesale price of electricity changes every 5 minutes. This is not the price that you pay. You generally have either a fixed tariff or a time of use tariff with your retailer. And they purchase energy over the long term, and they hedge their bets and they charge the margin to you. We're exposed directly to the wholesale electricity market, so we're able to charge when the price goes negative, and we're rewarded for that. And then the price typically only gets as high as around $300 per megawatt hour, or 30 cents per kilowatt hour. But sometimes the price spikes up to over $15,000 per megawatt hour. So on a day-to-day basis, the battery might make $25, $50. On a day when something goes incredibly wrong, the battery can make a lot of its money in one day. We don't model those catastrophic events. So our modelling is, in a sense, quite conservative, because catastrophic events seem to happen. So Callide C is a Queensland coal generator, just blew up. And there was severe economic implications for that, as well as power system implications. We've seen things like transmission towers go down as well. Whenever there are catastrophic events, there are very high energy prices. We saw the energy crisis as well. We don't model those, but we know that they tend to happen. The other aspects of the revenue generation, the blue is network tariffs. So United Energy offer a network tariff that essentially pays us a very small amount to charge during the day, and pays us a very small amount, 1 cent per kilowatt hour, to discharge in the evening. So it's not much to hang your hat on if that was your only business, but it enables all of the other revenue generation. If we had to pay as much as a household or a small business to operate the battery, it would be far less commercially viable. And the reason they offer this tariff is that we're doing something that actually supports the quality of the network providing energy. The middle two are markets for control of frequency. I won't go into the details of this, but suffice to say that there are other system services that the Australian Energy Market Operator requires, that it procures from market participants such as Acacia Energy, and the battery, at least the North Fitzroy battery and presumably the Flinders battery, would be part of Acacia Energy's portfolio by which it provides these services, and some of the revenue would be derived from that. The revenue should cover the operating expenses of the battery. What's left over is profit, and the intention for this profit, can I say this? Yeah. The intention is to set up a community benefits fund such that the profits can be reinvested in the Mornington Peninsula Shire community to support solar installations on community facilities for vulnerable communities, initiatives that both support the community economically and socially, but also in terms of decarbonisation. So if there was any doubt around the profits, it won't be flowing to Council or Yef or Acacia beyond covering the operating expenses.
Thank you, Lachlan. I've just seen a couple of questions around the back, so I might jump there.
It's Peter. You said it's if I understood it correctly, looking at 120 kilowatts. For me to understand this volume of that, how many Teslas would that charge?
Does anyone have a Tesla that they can tell me what the storage capacity of is? 80 kilowatt hours. So there's a difference between power and energy. The battery has 120 kilowatts of power. So if someone were to lift a fridge, say, and it required 120 kilowatts of power to lift that fridge, but they held that for 3 seconds, it might consume 120 kilowatt seconds of energy. So the battery has 120 kilowatts of power. That's how much power it can put out at any one time instantaneously. Its storage capacity is 360 kilowatt hours. So if you had an 80 kilowatt hour Tesla, it would be 4.5 of those.
Thank you.
The charging stations are 50 kilowatt in the opposite part at the moment. So that's the actual draw.
Yeah, okay.
Maximum draw.
Yeah. So the battery would have about double that power capacity.
I think we might have time for just a few more questions. I'm conscious that we're getting towards the end of our allotted sort of time that we've taken from you.
Thank you. I'm Mark Holland. An observation and a question. The observation is thank you very much for everybody who's done all of this work and background. And I have to conclude that if somebody thinks it's worthy of giving us a grant of $500,000 to build a battery, then most of the questions that are being asked have already been addressed. My question then is the community hall in Flinders. It has a massive array of solar panels on the roof, and I'm wondering whether if you were able to site the battery there, would it, for example, provide power to the CFA? Would it provide power for lighting of the tennis courts at night? And is that a community benefit that this sort of concept envisages?
Thank you so much. I'll just pass that. Oh, yeah. Give you.
I'll have to go and investigate the demand of the tennis court lights, the energy demand. But firstly, the site that the town hall sits on is actually Deaker-owned land. It's actually not council-owned land. So that makes it complex because it will mean a long, protracted negotiation process with Deaker to try and get that located there. There are a very large number of panels on that community hall, and that is to suit the demand for that building only. But it is when it's being used, but it is obviously excess power every other time. So that's one of the reasons we went back to United Energy and said, will you look at that site on Cook Street, the park? Because when the feasibility was done back 12 months ago, looked at last time, that solar array wasn't there and it wasn't that size when it was being planned. It was upscaled. So council is looking at, is actually doing a pilot at the moment of a virtual power plant. So it's one of council's arrays that will be included in that virtual power plant trial to see how local solar can be shared throughout other council buildings. And once that trial is complete, there's opportunities then with the knowledge learned from that of what could happen with that solar array, whether there's excess solar there to share with other community facilities, with the community in general. There's a bit of work to do from the learnings associated with that, and it's because it's all greenfield, I suppose. It's all new projects and a new sort of thinking for council, for local government. It's not really our place or space thinking about energy, but it is now. So we are sharing as much information as we can as soon as we have it, and we're hopeful that we can keep as much solar in the community rather than transporting it away from the community as possible.
Thanks, Steph. All right, I've got a question over here.
Stephen Croker. I've just got a few basic questions about the battery from a user perspective. Could one of you give us an idea of how many people can feed into the battery? How many can draw from it? Are they the same people? How close to the battery do they need to be? Do the people feeding in get paid? Do the people drawing from it pay? Basically.
Can we go over those in, well, maybe Lachlan's got a better memory than me, but essentially it won't be something that you need to connect to. In fact, yeah, I'll let Lachlan speak to it.
Yeah, so electricity is a funny thing. In alternating current systems, which is our power system, the electrons shimmy back and forth. They don't actually travel. So what's travelling is more like billiard balls. Where you draw the boundary of the system essentially defines who's connected. In a sense, everyone in the eastern states of Australia would be connected. In a more relevant sense, those people who are, is it this slide? Within the particular low voltage network, which, to give you an idea, I'd say maybe if you went a radius of 50, 60 metres from the transformer on King Street, it's probably a bit bigger than that actually. That would be sort of the geographic area where the battery is installed. As I said, no one will notice the battery except if you are being curtailed and you're no longer curtailed when the battery's charging. There's no cost to residents. There's no financial benefit to anyone who's charging or just, exporting their solar. Oh, wrong button. There's a lot of info on this slide, but essentially once someone exports their solar, it goes into the market. The battery purchases energy from the market in order to charge. What's happening physically is, in a way, kind of undefined. What matters in terms of revenue generation and your power bills is the accounting books. And the battery is unable to charge directly from homes, so it has to go through the market. That's the system we have in place, and that's the system that's physically possible. I don't know, does that answer your question?
It can support up to 200 homes, so
Yeah.
size battery.
Yeah. The size of a low voltage network is typically 100 to 300 households. Kingley is the one that we looked at in the feasibility study. That was reasonably large, I think 200, 250.
I think you can click to it in the slides. Yeah, so that's
So-
the Kingley.
Yeah, the network is as far as the blue lines extend. They're the conductors that supply households. So yeah, a bit more than 50 metres, I'd say.
Stephen from Acacia Energy, here we go.
Thank you. Steve Thompson from Acacia Energy. So we're the operator of the battery. We'll install the battery, and we're also the retailer for the operation of this battery in the national electricity market. In relation to this specific question, at home, you've got your retail contract with your electricity retailer, whoever that ends up being. The battery won't change that contract. So your contract with your electricity retailer is for the electrons that flow in and out of your electricity meter at your house, and that sets the rates that you are paid or pay for the electricity that you use or the electricity you export. In this case, we're the retailer for the battery, so we're buying that electricity that's measured, and we are buying that from the wholesale market, and then we export it back into the grid and we get paid for it by the wholesale market. And as Lachlan explained, the net profit that is made by the battery after the revenues that we've earned goes back into this pool, and that net profit will end up being the community benefit fund that is the real benefit, the dollar value benefit of what's actually been operated here. So as the idea, you're sort of oblivious to the fact that the battery is there in your electricity accounts that you pay for, is because we've got a system in Australia where we pay for our electricity through the retailer that we contract with at our homes, and then this battery is just like a home. It's connected to the electricity network. It's its own entity in that rate. We're buying the electricity and we're selling it, and with the other services and things that we have. And we're special in that the distribution network has set up a tariff specifically encouraging these batteries to go in, because we operate them in a way that is helpful to the network. So they, whilst it's a small payment, they pay us to use electricity during the day when there's potentially an excess of solar that would cause a problem. And then they pay us to export electricity in the evening when there is a high demand for the use of electricity in the evening. And normally everyone else is paying for every bit of electricity that goes through their meter. So that's the arrangement that we're in.
Yeah, but hang on, excuse me. You said it's no effect on the retail, correct? The bill we get from them. So what's the benefit to me as an individual connecting to this battery?
So I guess
Is it if it's a community? If it's just for the community, that's fine. Do I personally get any benefit financially?
Flinders will have lower augmentation of the network, and as a consequence, tariffs in Victoria will be reduced.
In Victoria?
In isolation, you won't get a direct benefit.
I won't.
No.
Thank you for the question. Answer.
Do we have any more questions? I think we might have time for one more.
One more
Yep.
question.
Brian Bird's my name, I live in Flinders. Why can't we use the hopper area? What's the problem down there? The hopper, siding of the battery.
It's also Deca land.
Who?
Deca, Del.
Who are they?
Department of Environment.
What, we can't negotiate with them?
if we so typically negotiating with I guess every sort of stakeholder that you bring into it adds a lot more time and complexity. So whether or not it would get approval from DECA is, I guess, something that isn't really known, and it just, at least my understanding is that, well, it's much
the
easier
most
process.
simplistic and fastest processes to use.
And also, sorry, your name?
The network characteristics of that location aren't suitable.
What, too far away from the transformer?
It's not connected to a residential area, insufficient solar storage.
So I think, unless we've got one quick question, this will be the last one.
Just a response to that, I mean, there is a tangible financial benefit to it's the community fund.
Yeah.
It's the net profit. Mr. Kashap said, so, you know, you don't actually get it in your hip pocket, but it's benefit for the community. Yeah.
How long does the battery last?
I think it's 10 years. Is
So the 10 to 15 year life is the high performance life. We anticipate that after 10 to 15 years, battery technology will have advanced so much that we probably would make more economic sense to replace it then rather than continue its life. Part of the profits will go towards a decommissioning fund so that it can be at its end of life to be appropriately decommissioned. Yes.
All right, folks, I think we might need to leave it there. I'm going to steal the clicker from whoever has it. Great. All right. Well, here we go. Going through the highlights reel again. All right. So, great. I'm going to say a quick thank you for everyone for coming along and for bringing all your incredible questions and engaging with this process. It means a lot to us to have people turning up and being present in the space. So the next steps for being involved in this process, we'd really love you to fill in our survey about community batteries. So that's on that link here. I'm sure that we can do a follow-up email from Flinders Zero Carbon Communities or Council to provide this link to everyone. Also send us your questions. You can send your questions to me at YEF. So that's right there, mari.lakey@yef.org.au. You can also send questions to Flinders Zero Carbon Communities. They've got their, that's up on the FAQs. Also, the Flinders Zero Carbon Community Newsletter is going to be a source of information. And we'll also be in touch about a Christmas feedback period coming up. But I think that that's everything from us. Yep. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time. Feel free to ask us any little questions you have at the end. But yeah, we're done. And sorry. I also thank you so much to everyone who's spoken today. Thank you to Flinders Zero Carbon Community, John for speaking so well and describing kind of the intention and the purpose behind this project. Steph for coming up and answering so many questions and really giving that council perspective. And Lachlan as well from
And Mike's on AV.
Yeah. Yep. All right, we'll let you go now. Thank you.